in a way, I want you to think of this worry, this fear, almost like it's a stew, right? And a stew has all kinds of vegetables and meats and starches in it, right? So we've got this big pot, and we've got these rising inflationary prices. Wages aren't going up, workers are angry, and we're throwing all this in this stew, and we're adding general strikes, and we throw that in this stew, and people are starting to get afraid, worried about revolution here in America. But there's something else we can add to this stew too that's going to continue to kind of stoke the flames out of this stew, and really get people worried about revolution, and that's going to be race relations. Because that economic turmoil that hits factory owners is no longer going to be limited to just whites. Remember? What was that thing called? Do you remember what that thing was called, where we had all of these African American workers moving to the north from the south? They stopped sharecropping and they were moving upwards into the north to work in those factory jobs? That great migration? Well, we have all of these African Americans that are feeling the pinch of these rising costs but not rising wages. And at the same time, these workers are having huge numbers of whites, millions of them, returning from Europe, looking for their jobs again in places like Detroit and Columbus and Cleveland and Pittsburgh. And those whites are finding that their job isn't there because there's an African American that is now in that job. And that's a big change. That's a big difference, where you have people that traditionally had no problem getting a job now find someone who's in the same position, and they want their job back. So you're going to see this economic tension that African Americans are feeling, pressured from two sides. On one side, African Americans have this issue of ever shrinking wages in the face of inflation, and then on the other side, we have coming here millions of whites that want their jobs back that African Americans are in thanks to the Great Migration. And that pressure that's building on African Americans, it's going to explode in a series of race riots. You're going to actually see whites begin to riot first because they've lost their jobs to African Americans, and then you're going to see blacks riot against the whites, fighting back. And this is really important because really what we're seeing here for the first time are large numbers of African Americans fighting back in riots against whites over economic issues. Typically, this doesn't happen, right? Let's not forget what used to happen every time a black person decided to riot against a white person or do what a white person didn't want them to do, and that, of course, would be lynching. And you can see, lynchings here from the early 1900s. Lynchings aren't just something that's Civil War related or Ku Klux Klan related. It happens north and south, especially after World War I comes to an end, because we have so many African Americans that are really feeling the pressure of the economy as whites are returning home and they want those jobs. There's a reason why the NAACP, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, is going to push for federal laws against lynching, because they're really seeing for the first time large numbers of lynchings happening north and south. And so we really want to take a look at that as another component of that stew that's making Americans afraid of revolution.